You know what? I'm gonna do. Oh, what is that?
That's a grown man screaming in his own kitchen mid-phone call with nobody else in the house. Seconds later, he's out the front door and into his truck, and he's not going back inside for anything. These scary videos come from TikTok user Cassie Bay. She says she'd left home one Monday night after a family argument and driven to her mum's place to cool off. A few hours later, her husband rang her in a state. He told her the kitchen bench had started vibrating underneath his hand. He couldn't explain it. He couldn't make it stop. So he screamed, grabbed his keys, and got out. When Cassie pulled into the driveway, he was still sitting in the cab of his truck. He wouldn't come inside, wouldn't even walk up to the door. So the two of them sat down and pulled up the security footage together.
Guy that says, you know what? I'm gonna do.
The scream is already unsettling on its own, but rewind the tape a minute or two back to when he's still calmly on the phone and something else starts to jump out. Keep your eyes on the bench. A small red packet shifts position on its own. Then a stack of papers near a baseball cap flutters. Her husband is standing only a few feet away the entire time, phone to his ear, completely oblivious. The activity didn't stop once Cassie got home, electronics switching on by themselves, 3 sharp knocks at the front door with nobody standing on the other side, the cats fixating on empty corners of the room. In a later clip, she's home alone when an unidentified noise rattles her badly enough that her reaction gets caught on camera. Eventually, the family saged the entire house. Here's the detail that's kept viewers coming back. Cassie says several neighbours have reported similar experiences in the area, and she claims a bit of local research turned up recorded Native American burial mounds on the land the houses were built on. Over 1 million views, thousands of comments, and a husband who, for at least one night, would rather sleep in his truck than step back through his own front door. At 3:47 in the morning, a motion-activated security camera at a remote workshop triggers exactly once. A figure walks behind the building heading toward a fenced dead end. It never comes back.
Spooky.
The footage was recorded in 2020 at a small workshop run by the uploader's father. It's an isolated property and the camera had been set up to catch trespassers. In the clip, a woman in a white dress moves behind the building, heading straight for a section of fencing that borders railroad tracks and dense woods. No path, no street, no exit on the other side.
Spooky.
The uploader later posted a daytime photo of the layout. It shows the workshop backing onto a fenced corridor along the railway with industrial buildings beyond. Both sides of the tracks are fenced off. There's genuinely nowhere for a person to go. And here's the part that's kept this clip circulating. The camera never triggered again. Whoever or whatever walked into that dead end didn't walk back out. No second activation, no return trip, nothing. The camera would have caught anyone leaving the way they came in. It caught the entry. It never caught the exit. The footage itself is rough, a recording of a screen rather than a direct export. Hundreds of commenters have suggested a trespasser, a shortcut along the tracks, someone who found a gap in the fence. The uploader's answer has stayed the same. There is no gap. 1 camera trigger in, 0 camera triggers out. keep your eyes on the gate. It swings open on its own. This isn't a flimsy garden gate either. The homeowner says it has a latch. Something had to physically lift it. Moments later, this happens. The swing chair on the porch starts rocking, slowly at first, then with a steady rhythm, as if someone's just sat down. And if you turn the volume up, there's one more thing. A low growl picked up by the camera's microphone. Look at the trees in the background, completely still. Whatever moved that gate, it wasn't the wind. One commenter put it best. It's as if something opened the gate, walked onto the porch, and made itself comfortable on the swing.
For 38 years, I've never been involved or seen anything to this extent as far as injuries caused by a wild animal.
Those are the words of Pittsburgh County Sheriff Frankie McClendon, describing an attack so savage that investigators still can't identify what animal was responsible. Alicia Maxey, a mother from the McAllister area in Oklahoma, was found severely injured on a Sunday morning in a remote yard near the tiny community of Blanco. She'd gone to the property hoping to find work. She never made it to the front door.
In a remote yard in Blanco, Oklahoma, Alicia Maxey was ambushed before she could even reach the front door of a home where she was hoping to find work.
According to investigators, Alicia heard a deep growl before she could reach the entrance. She turned to run back to her truck and something pounced, knocking her to the ground. She described the creature as dog-like, but couldn't say with certainty that it was a dog. The injuries were catastrophic. Alicia was airlifted to Ascension St. John Hospital in Tulsa with gruesome wounds to her face, arms, and legs. The Pittsburgh County Sheriff's Office initially suspected a dog attack, but the sheer scale of the injuries prompted them to bring in the Oklahoma Department of Wildlife. Torn clothing and physical evidence were collected from the scene and sent to a wildlife laboratory for analysis. Sheriff McClendon made clear this was unlike anything he'd encountered in nearly 4 decades of law enforcement. The wounds didn't match the typical pattern of a domestic dog attack, raising the question of whether a bear, a mountain lion, or something else entirely was responsible. The story took on an added layer of tragedy when it emerged that Alicia's husband Wallace is currently on dialysis and awaiting a kidney transplant. With Alicia hospitalized and their only vehicle towed from the scene, the family, including their 2 young daughters, was left in an impossible position. The case was picked up by outlets including Fox 23 Tulsa and Coast to Coast AM, drawing thousands of comments debating what kind of animal could have inflicted such devastating injuries in rural Oklahoma. As of the last reports, wildlife lab results hadn't been released. Whatever attacked Alicia Maxey that morning in Blanco remains officially unidentified. McRaven House in Vicksburg, Mississippi has been called one of the most haunted buildings in the American South. It served as a field hospital during the Civil War. At least 3 people are known to have died within its walls. Its history stretches back to the early 1800s, and one visitor took a photo of a mirror inside. The image was captured during a routine ghost tour. On the right side of the reflection, you can make out a person holding a phone, likely another tour guest. Look at the left side of the mirror. In the dark corner of the reflection, there's a dark, vaguely human shape. No clearly defined features, no face, no limbs, but its outline is distinctly different from the furniture, curtains, and doorways around it. Here's the trouble with mirror photos in dark rooms. Our eyes desperately want to find something familiar in the murk. The low lighting and the natural distortion of old glass makes certainty almost impossible. And pareidolia, the brain's knack for finding faces in shadow, explains a lot of photos just like this one. But this is McRaven House. If any mirror in the world were going to catch something it shouldn't, it would be one inside these walls. Watch the shadow under the truck. It keeps appearing, vanishing, reappearing, not a slow drift like you'd expect from passing clouds or shifting sunlight. It moves with purpose, darting in and out of frame as if it's hiding. The person filming watches for a while, capturing the behavior over and over. Eventually, they decide to investigate. They walk a full circle around the truck, check every angle. Nothing. No animal, no person, no obvious source. And that's the part that's unsettled viewers. Shadows need something to cast them. Light hits an object, the object blocks the light. So what was blocking the light under that truck? Some suggested a small animal darting just out of frame, others thought a reflection off a nearby surface, but quite a few landed on the same uncomfortable thought, that the shadow's movement looks almost deliberate, like something crouched low, watching the person who was watching it. A senior FEMA official has gone on the record to say that God teleported him 50 miles through the air and deposited him inside a Waffle House in Rome, Georgia. That isn't a joke, and it isn't a headline from a satirical website. It's a claim made on a public podcast by Greg Phillips, the Associate Administrator for the Office of Response and Recovery at FEMA, the agency responsible for managing billions of dollars in American disaster relief.
It was scary in a way. I mean, you don't really know, okay, is this evil? Is this good? What is this? What do I do with this? How do I deal with it?
In a January 2025 episode of the podcast Onward, Phillips told listeners he'd mentioned to his sons that he was heading out for food. And then, according to him, something extraordinary happened.
I was on the phone, oh my God, what's happening? And I was landed.
He instantaneously ended up inside a Waffle House 50 miles away.
I was with my boys one time and I was telling I was going to go to Waffle House and get Waffle House. And I ended up at a Waffle House. This is in Georgia. And I ended up at a Waffle House like 50 miles away from where I was.
When his son rang to ask where he'd gone, he told them he was in Rome, Georgia.
They said, where are you? I said, a Waffle House. They said, Waffle House where? And I said, Waffle House in Rome, Georgia.
Their response was that it wasn't possible because he'd only just left the room a moment earlier.
I said, that's not possible. You just left here like a moment ago. But it was possible. It was real.
On the podcast, he described the sensation of involuntary teleportation as genuinely unpleasant. He said it's no fun because you don't really understand what's happening and it's scary. Since it happens involuntarily, there's nothing you can do about it. You just go along for the ride.
Teleporting is no fun. It's no fun because you don't really know what you're doing. You don't really understand it.
And in case anyone was wondering whether this was a one-off, it wasn't. Phillips has also claimed that on a separate occasion, he was driving his car when the entire vehicle was suddenly lifted into the air. He described himself and his car flying through the sky before being dropped roughly 40 miles away, landing in a ditch outside a church near Albany, Georgia. 2 supernatural teleportation events, 1 senior federal disaster management official, not a single independent witness to either of them.
I was on the phone, oh my God, what's happening? And I was landed. And landed about 40 miles away in a ditch outside of a Baptist church in a little tiny town just where you cross over the border. And it was an incredibly frightening moment.
After CNN picked up the original podcast clip and it started circulating, the New York Times decided to actually investigate the Waffle House claim. Reporters interviewed roughly 24 Waffle House employees and regular customers across 3 separate locations in Rome, Georgia. Not one could corroborate the story. Not one could recall a senior federal official materializing out of thin air in the middle of a shift. Shastoni Burge, a longtime server at one of the Rome locations, told reporters she'd seen just about everything you can see at a Waffle House, but she'd never seen that. The internet had a field day. The dominant joke was that the only people who normally teleport to a Waffle House without remembering how they got there are blackout drunk. Democratic lawmakers were less amused. Senator Mazie Hirono and others pointed to the comments as evidence that Phillips doesn't have the grip on reality you'd want in someone managing billions of dollars in federal disaster relief. Phillips's response to the mockery was to double down. On Truth Social, he defended the whole thing as a religious miracle. He attributed the 50-mile relocation to the power of God moving him, as he put it, in a moment during a spiritual battle. He compared the experience to miracles described in the Bible, including the resurrection of Jesus Christ, and cited a passage from the book of Acts in which the Apostle Philip is snatched away by the Spirit of the Lord. Phillips noted that the Bible refers to this as being transported or translated, terms he now uses interchangeably with teleportation. He also claimed his podcast remarks had been taken completely out of context. The conversation, he said, had actually been about his spiritual journey during a period when he was heavily medicated for cancer treatment and believed at the time he was in the last 3 months of his life. That caveat matters. A man facing what he believes is a terminal diagnosis, heavily medicated, describing profound spiritual experiences on a podcast about faith is a very different story to a senior federal official calmly explaining that God teleports him to breakfast. But the job he holds doesn't allow for the distinction. FEMA's Office of Response and Recovery is the arm of the agency that coordinates the federal response to hurricanes, wildfires, floods, and mass casualty events. It's the office Americans rely on when everything else has failed, and the man running it has gone on the record repeatedly saying he's been physically teleported through the air by divine intervention on at least 2 separate occasions. He's sticking to his story either way.
It's scary in a way. I mean, you don't really know, okay, is this evil? Is this good? What is this? What do I do with this? How do I deal with it?
A delivery driver places a package on a doorstep. He turns to leave, and then the door handle starts rattling behind him. The footage comes from a viewer named Jill, captured on her front door security camera. Jill says nobody was home at the time, not her, not her family, not even the dog. You can see the driver stop, turn back. He clearly expects someone to open the door. He waits for a moment, looking at the handle. Nobody comes. Jill says you need the volume up to fully appreciate how loud the rattling is. It's not a subtle creak. It's not a gentle vibration. It sounds like someone's actively grabbing the handle and shaking it. So what made that door handle rattle so much that the delivery driver stopped to take notice? Let me know your theories in the comments below. A woman takes a photo out her bedroom window at sunset in 2023. She doesn't notice anything strange at the time. It's only months later, scrolling through her gallery one night, that she sees something in the reflection on the glass that stops her cold. There's a face looking back at her. Take a close look at the window. It isn't obvious at first. The sunset outside is doing most of the work, pulling your eye to the sky. But the longer you stare at the glass, the harder it is to unsee. A pale, eerie face caught in the reflection. The photo was shared on the r/paranormal subreddit by a user called OKEnvironment441. She'd sat on the image for nearly 2 years before she was willing to post it. She'd been home alone the night it was taken. Her partner was overseas in another country. The obvious counter is that it's a reflection from a TV screen. She says she didn't have a TV in her bedroom at the time and she doesn't own an iPhone either. a detail she brought up specifically because she could see the ghost editing app accusations coming before anyone typed them. When skeptics pushed harder, she posted a follow-up photo from the same window in the same light, just to show what it normally looks like. And then there's the detail she added at the end of her post, almost as an afterthought. One of the houses visible in the frame, the one partially hidden behind the big tree, has a reputation in her town for being haunted. The local story is that a boy in the 1950s had been hiding from his friends during a game, climbed into an old fridge, and suffocated inside it. She says the property still isn't right, and everyone in the area knows it. Pareidolia explains a lot of grainy reflection photos. The brain's wired to find faces in noise, and window glass at sunset is the perfect canvas for it. But she wasn't looking for a ghost when she scrolled past that photo. She was looking at sunsets. And something in the glass made her stop. She waited 2 years to post it, not because she wanted attention, because she was scared of what she'd photographed and she wanted it off her phone. In 2011, a woman named Nicola visited Warkworth Castle in Northumberland, England with her sister. Warkworth sits between Amble and Alnmouth, a medieval fortress with a history stretching back to the 12th century. Nicola took photos throughout the grounds. She didn't notice anything unusual at the time. It was only when she got home and loaded the images onto her laptop that she saw them. Look at the windowsill of the castle's wine cellar. It's quite hard to see at first, but you can make out two figures sitting on the sill, dressed in what appear to be medieval clothes. They weren't visible to the naked eye during the visit. No one else was in the cellar at the time, and yet, there they are. And this is where the story stops being a one-off. In 2012, Nicola returned to the castle and took another photograph in the same spot. One of the figures appears again, the same medieval man from the first photo, but now he has a child with him. Above them sits a strange purple haze that Nicola believes could be some kind of portal. Old stone walls, dust particles, and lens flare can conspire to create shapes that look eerily human, especially in low light. That's a legitimate explanation for one photo. It's a harder explanation for the same figure in the same location a full year apart. A glowing, human-shaped figure stands on a footpath caught on a workplace security camera. Then it dissolves into nothing. The clip was shared on the Ghosts subreddit by a user who says it was recorded at their place of work. It doesn't walk away, it doesn't duck behind a wall, it doesn't move out of frame, it dissipates. So is this just low-quality security camera footage doing its thing, or is something more mysterious happening here? If you want to see more scary videos, hit that subscribe button, smash like, and leave some comments below. The more you interact with our channel, the more you'll see us in your feed. On the morning of February 27th, 2026, a 68-year-old man walked out of his Albuquerque home and vanished into thin air. He left behind his phone, his prescription glasses, his smartwatch, everything a person would normally carry. But this wasn't an ordinary missing persons case. The man who disappeared was retired United States Air Force Major General William Neil McCasland, and the base he used to command sits at the dead center of American UFO mythology. To understand why his disappearance has sent shockwaves through the UFO community, you need to understand who Neil McCasland actually was. McCaslin graduated from the US Air Force Academy in 1979 with a degree in astronautical engineering. Over the next 3 decades, he rose through some of the most classified corners of American aerospace research. He worked with the National Reconnaissance Office, he oversaw space weapons programs, he commanded the Phillips Research Site at Kirtland Air Force Base in New Mexico. And then, in his final posting, he took command of the Air Force Research Laboratory at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio. For anyone who's ever fallen down a UFO rabbit hole, that name means something. Wright-Patterson was the headquarters of Project Blue Book, the United States military's official UFO investigation program that ran from 1952 to 1969. More importantly, it's the base where the debris from the alleged 1947 Roswell crash was reportedly shipped. For nearly 80 years, researchers, witnesses, and whistleblowers have insisted that whatever came down in the New Mexico desert ended up inside a classified hangar at Wright-Patterson. And Neil McCaslin used to run the laboratory there. But it gets stranger. In 2016, WikiLeaks published a trench of emails belonging to John Podesta, the former White House Chief of Staff. Buried inside those emails was a message from Tom DeLonge, the Blink 182 co-founder turned UFO disclosure advocate. DeLonge wrote this to Podesta about McCaslin. When Roswell crashed, they shipped it to the laboratory at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. General McCaslin was in charge of that exact laboratory up to a couple years ago. He not only knows what I'm trying to achieve, he helped assemble my advisory team. In other words, according to Tom DeLonge, Neil McCaslin wasn't just a retired general who'd once commanded a famous base. He was allegedly inside the circle, a man who, if any of it was real, would know exactly what was sitting in that hangar. And now, he's gone. Here's what we know about the morning he disappeared. At around 10 in the morning on February 27th, a repairman was at the McCaslin home on Quail Run Court in northeast Albuquerque. The two men spoke briefly. The repairman would later be cleared of any involvement. At 11:10 that same morning, McCaslin's wife, Susan, left the house for a medical appointment. When she returned at 12:04, her husband was gone. The timeline gives a window of less than 1 hour, and in that window, a 68-year-old man walked out of his own home and erased himself from the face of the earth. His phone was still there, his glasses were still there, his smartwatch was still there. None of it made sense. But some things were missing. His wallet, a red backpack, and a .38 caliber revolver with its leather holster. Susan reported him missing at 3:07 that afternoon. By the next day, the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office had issued a silver alert. What followed was one of the largest search operations the county had seen in years. Deputies canvassed more than 700 homes. They deployed drones, search and rescue teams, and K-9 units through the Sandia Mountain foothills, where McCaslin loved to hike. At night, they flew helicopters equipped with forward-looking infrared cameras across the cliffs and canyons, hoping to catch a heat signature. Didn't work. Lieutenant Carl Woods of the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office described the problem at a press conference. The mountain was lit up like a candle, the unseasonably warm spring had turned the rocks themselves into heat sources, and the thermal cameras couldn't distinguish between a human body and the baking stone around it. Then on March 7th, searchers found something, a grey United States Air Force sweatshirt lying about 1.25 miles east of the McCaslin home. No blood, no other clothing nearby. And to this day, his family haven't confirmed whether it ever belonged to him. The longer the search dragged on, the stranger the details became. McCaslin owned a second home in Pagosa Springs, Colorado, about 200 miles north. Investigators drove up to check it. Inside, they recovered a light green, long-sleeved button-up shirt and a pair of hiking boots, items that matched what he was believed to be wearing the day he vanished. How they got there, nobody has ever publicly explained. By the middle of March, the FBI's Albuquerque field office had joined the investigation. The Air Force Office of Special Investigations was assisting, and Congressman Eric Burleson, a Republican from Missouri, had formally called for a federal probe describing the disappearance as deeply concerning. It's remarkable that General McCaslin apparently walked out of his home, left all of his devices, and never came back, Burleson said. Then came the 911 call.
This is April. How may I help you?
Hi, April. My name is Susan Wilkerson. My husband is missing.
Audio obtained by the Law and Crime Network captured Susan McCaslin Wilkerson speaking to dispatchers on the day her husband vanished, and what she said in that call has haunted the case ever since.
This is April. How may I help you?
Hi, April. My name is Susan Wilkerson. My husband is missing. He's left his phone. He changed his clothes into I don't know what. I think he's on foot. All of our cars and bicycles are in the garage.
She told the dispatcher she believed her husband had planned not to be found.
It's been about 3 hours, and I have some indication that he must have planned not to be found.
According to Susan, in the months leading up to his disappearance, McCaslin had been struggling. He'd reported experiencing what he called mental fog. He was seeing a doctor for anxiety, short-term memory loss, and insomnia. He had even mentioned, at one point, not wanting to live if his brain and body kept deteriorating. His wife has been clear and consistent in her public statements. She doesn't believe her husband was abducted. She doesn't believe this is a UFO case. She said on Facebook that Neil had only a brief association with the UFO community, that he worked with Tom DeLonge for a short time as an unpaid consultant on what she described as fiction projects, and that her husband has no special knowledge about any Roswell debris. She pointed out that McCaslin retired nearly 13 years ago. It seemed, in her words, quite unlikely that anyone would go to the trouble of abducting a man to extract secrets that old. And the rational case is strong. A 68-year-old man experiencing cognitive decline takes his wallet, his backpack, and his gun. He walks out the door while his wife is at an appointment. He's an experienced outdoorsman who knows the Sandia foothills intimately. He may have chosen a place where he wouldn't be found, and he may have had the means to make sure of it. It's a tragic story, but it's not a mystery. Except for Wright Patterson, except for the Podesta emails, except for the fact that his disappearance came just days after President Trump announced he was ordering the Pentagon to release classified records on extraterrestrial life and unidentified aerial phenomena. Except for the missing gun that's never been found in a search area that's been combed for weeks. Except for the hiking gear that somehow ended up at a house 200 miles away. Except for the fact that this is the 9th scientist or military figure with ties to advanced aerospace or classified research to die or disappear in under 3 years. 3 NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory colleagues, dead or missing, 2 Los Alamos National Laboratory employees, vanished in New Mexico within 2 months of each other, an MIT fusion physicist shot in his own home, a Caltech astrophysicist gunned down on his front porch at 6 in the morning, and now a retired 2-star general who once ran the most UFO-adjacent base in the country. Luis Elizondo, the former Department of Defense intelligence officer who ran the Pentagon's shadowy Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, was asked about McCaslin's disappearance by CNN. His response was measured, but the subtext was heavy. He said he hoped and prayed this wasn't one of those cases where a former senior military officer had been specifically targeted, and that McCaslin would be found happy and healthy for the sake of his loved ones. He didn't say it couldn't be. Congressman Tim Burchett, a member of the House Oversight Committee's UFO subcommittee, has gone further. He's warned publicly that people with knowledge of classified programs may be at risk. He's called the cluster of deaths and disappearances a pattern that the FBI needs to investigate, and the count keeps climbing. As of the most recent update on April 8, 2026, independent researchers added a 9th name to the list. Dr. Michael David Hicks, a NASA JPL research scientist who'd worked on the DART asteroid deflection mission, had quietly died back in July of 2023. No cause of death was ever publicly disclosed. His case had been sitting in plain sight for nearly 3 years before anyone connected the dots. So what really happened on Quail Run Court that Friday morning? Was Neil McCaslin a brilliant, proud man who felt his mind slipping and who chose the mountains he loved as the place to end it on his own terms? A tragic story that doesn't belong on any conspiracy list, amplified into something sinister by an internet hungry for patterns. Or was he the last person standing in a chain of people who knew too much, disappeared at the exact moment the American government was being dragged towards disclosure, in the same state where 2 other cleared employees had already vanished without a trace? Nearly 7 weeks on, nobody can say. His wallet is missing, his gun is missing, his backpack is missing. And somewhere out there in the foothills of the Sandias, or in a place nobody's thought to look yet, a retired 2-star general who once commanded the most secretive laboratory in the United States Air Force is still gone. If he planned not to be found, he's succeeded. And if he didn't plan it at all, then whatever took him has succeeded too. Want to see more scary videos? Then check out these episodes right here.